Hello, welcome to the Rezzed sessions here at EGX Rezzed 2019. I'm John, I'm from Rezzed, I'm just here to do the introduction. Our next panel is all about the lessons learned running a game studio. Obviously, studios come in a lot of shapes and sizes. There are many ways you can do it and many lessons to be learned, and the people on our panel have learned them all in ways easy and hard. So I'm going to hand you over to our panel to introduce themselves. Please give them a very warm welcome.
Hi there, my name's Shella Ramanan. I'm a games journalist and I'm a developer as well. I was in the Left Field collection this time last year. So I'm just going to introduce the panel a bit. So starting a studio is a really big step for an indie developer. Ultimately, we just want to make games, but with that comes the business of making games, from picking a project to paying contributors, getting funding, and making your second game. It's all a lot to think about. Luckily, we've got some great minds here on the panel to share some of their experiences and help smooth your journey. So if we can go along the panel and introduce yourselves, maybe tell us a bit about your studio and your backgrounds.
Yeah. So I'm Jodie Azhar. I'm the CEO and game director at Teasel Cat Games. I'm the youngest studio, on this panel. So I set up at the end of last year, but that's following a decade working in the industry as a technical artist. So my previous job before going independent was as the technical art director for Total War at Creative Assembly, which was over 500 people. So I went from 500 to 1. Bit of a change.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm a programmer and a game designer. I've been making games for 13 years. 5 of those years were in AAA in Japan and here in the UK. And for the last 8 years, I've been running my own independent studio and making independent games. Our first game, Tengami, was released 5 years ago, and our next game, Astrologasta, is coming out in May.
Hi, I'm Alexander Slawinski. I handle operations and finance for Mike Bithell. I'm commonly known as Mike Bithell's American. And just make sure that everything that isn't involving code works.
Hi, I'm Pavle Mikhailovic. I'm the co-founder and technical director at Flavorworks. We're making Erica, which is a really interactive mix of film and games that will be coming out soon-ish. And yeah, we've been going for about 4 years. We've been making games for about 7 or so.
Okay, so if we start at the beginning, what comes first? Is it the project or the team? What do you put together first? So I guess if we start at this end.
Right.
Yeah.
So in our case, the project and the team were kind of one thing, because it was really important for us to do something that played to our strengths, because it was me and my co-founder as a game designer. None of us are artists, and that did influence the fact that we decided to go with something that was interactive live action. And we had some experience with filming, so choosing something that played to our strengths was really important at the beginning.
For us, for example, Mike worked solo on Thomas Was Alone, which is almost a decade now ago. Then when he started working on Volume, he brought in contractors. That's when I also started. And so for us, it's then with Earthshape, and then Subsurface Circular, and then Quarantine Circular, and the thing we're working on right now. It's the concept comes first, and then figuring out what team members we need, how long do we need them, which is where budgeting comes in, which is my thing, and then figuring out how to bring people on, take them off, and that's it. So yes, project first, then people.
Okay, so maybe Jennifer, how do you pick the right people to be on your team?
So the way that I work is I come up with a concept for a game that I want to make, and I already have a creative vision in place. And I present it to a variety of people to see how do these people react, what kind of ideas are coming back from these people. And then I try to pick people who are not necessarily the most passionate, but I think like the most understanding of what I'm trying to achieve, and who are giving the most of themselves to these ideas, like who are helping me, you know, who are enriching the creative vision and who want to become a part of that. And that's how I go about it.
So for me, I'd been working on a lot of combat games for most of my career. So starting my own studio was in part being able to make games that I played, or that I wanted to give the industry more different kinds of stories. So I'm working on narrative games, and games that can be enjoyed by anyone who likes a relaxed experience. But when I announced the studio, I also wanted to put a big emphasis on sort of what was the studio I was building, because I had a vision for our first game. I knew what the game was that I wanted. And it's been finding other teammates has been finding people who can do what I'm rubbish at. So because I'm a technical artist, I can get the prototype all up and running, but there are certain skill areas where I don't have the experience. But in the long run, I want to build a studio that puts employee well-being at the forefront and have a group of people who all have different ideas, whether that's sort of their background or they're just very creative, not just in their specialization, but they want to be contributing to the games. So after our first project, I really want a group of people who are all contributing to, right, what are the ideas that we want in our next game?
So what about when you're putting the team together? Do you put them together for projects, or do you have, what about your core permanent team? How do you pick those people, the people that are going to stay with you?
I'm actually curious of following up on yours. So with the current project that you're doing, when you switch to the next project, when you have specific skill sets, like maybe the next game is more combat focused rather than narrative focused, you don't necessarily need that writer full time anymore. So do you already know, are you already sort of planning what the second project is? Like, and because if you're putting together the people that you're going to keep on long term, you actually then have to think ahead to that next project.
Yeah, so we are a narrative studio, so we're not going to completely diverge and change. The idea is that everything we make, we're building upon. So any tech that we develop ourselves, hopefully that contributes to the next game. But I think in terms of permanent staff, for me, it's finding those people who get what I'm doing with the first game and like the way that I run things, so that I build a team who work really well together. And there might be people on the first team, on our first project, that I'm like, you're really excellent at what you do, but you just want to focus on just writing really good words, but you're not thinking so much about how we'd be inventive about our next game. So I'm kind of keeping an eye out on sort of, right, who are the people that I want for the next project? And if I find that team in time that we've shipped the first game, that'd be great. Bring them on. They can hopefully decide what we do next. If not, then I have an idea for what we'd go on to. But it'd be within a similar vein, providing we're successful for the first game and people actually like that kind of product.
Yeah, so like for us, it's been challenging because we've switched genres on pretty much every single title that we've done. So, yes, we work with the same people, but establishing ourselves as having this permanent full-time thing doesn't actually make sense when we are bouncing about. So it's one of those things that if you're considering, I really like this style of game, but I want to do this style of game next, yes, you'll find the right collaborators, but it might not make sense to necessarily like come together as one team because one of the people just might not be into RTSs or narrative focused stuff, and it could lead to problems when you are discussing what the next project is.
And I think it's definitely worth sort of considering whether you want a permanent team and if you want a permanent location as well, because everyone that you're working with is remote, I think.
Yeah, and everybody who I work with is also remote.
And that has a lot of benefits of, well, people can work where they want and to the time that they want. So you're not kind of restricting people who wouldn't otherwise be able to work on your project.
Meanwhile, like you've got like almost a mini studio going.
Yeah, because we know the kind of projects that we wanna make going forward, and they're all kind of the same sort of game. Not like you guys, where you guys like switch types of games. We're trying to just create like a core team that can really sustain us like long term going into the future. And yeah, hiring for that has been difficult because we're trying to like hire for a very kind of long term view of, you know, can we keep making these kinds of experiences for a very long time. So we've had to actually establish, you know. Initially, it was more based on like just talking to people and seeing like who was passionate and who like had the same views as us. But we've had to establish now, you know, pretty like formal hiring processes where there's like actual, you know, rounds of interviews, and that's really helped us find the right people. Okay,
so so you've got your team and you've got your project. So what's the next step in terms of the sort of more business side of things, which I guess is where you were starting to talk about? So
yeah.
What's the kind of more the practical nitty-gritty of the business side of setting up a studio?
For us initially, when we first set up, our main priority was to get just a really good vertical slice. And I think at the time we might have like chanced upon it, but we got lucky that we really focused on just making a small bit that we knew we could finish, that we could then show to people. And we didn't immediately like start working on the game. We just decided, because of the nature of it, we could only like film a small bit of it and then make that into a really cool like little bit of game. And that was really good for us because we had something that we could actually like show to people and then use that to progress the business forward.
But what about in terms of, I don't know, do you get an accountant?
Yeah, definitely get an accountant. Definitely get an accountant.
So what are those things? What are the things you need, those key things for setting up those?
So incorporating a company or starting a company is pretty easy. You can do it on the internet in the UK. Just to have a limited company, I recommend that you have a limited company. So limited company means that the company, in case that you're being sued, the company takes the legal hit. So it's like you're protecting yourself. I think it costs £20, or it costs £20. It's £12.
Really
it's
cheap.
only £12.
Yeah.
So setting up the company is really cheap, and then I think when it becomes more difficult, like if you're hiring people, you need a payroll, you need to submit, you know, documentations about your spendings, etc., to the HMRC. So I recommend getting an accountant, and especially trying to find an accountant that already has some experience with video games. Because, for example, here in the UK, we have what's called a video game tax relief. In which can mean if your project qualifies, you get 20% back on eligible spendings. And it can be really useful to have an accountant who knows the in and outs of that.
I think there's also like some almost like symbolic importance to like incorporating a company, because it really kind of makes things like real, and then the project, oftentimes like just a project amongst a bunch of friends. That's how it starts. It becomes like a job that has this like formalized like ownership, like we own, you know, this, and we all like share ownership of it, and it kind of helped like formalize it and really push it forward.
And I think also there are certain funding opportunities where you have to have been a running, operating business for at least 12 months or whatever the time period is. So actually setting up as early as possible and being able to claim back on tax credits, be eligible for funding opportunities. You kind of don't want to miss out on stuff just because you avoided doing the kind of...
Yeah, it's super awkward if you get into a conversation with a publisher like Raw Fury and they love your game and everything's going super awesome, and you know, you find a lawyer very quickly to help you negotiate everything, and then the money comes in, but you A, haven't set up a company, B, don't have a company bank account, and everything. This happens, and it's still like something that's like, wait, so when did you make the company? About a week before we set up the bank account. And it's like, how did you negotiate the entire thing? But to go back to the accountants and lawyer thing, it's so much of my job is the not sexy stuff that it's lawyers and accountants are two of those things. With accountants, okay, cool. You don't have an accountant right off the bat, but you definitely are using like something like Xero or QuickBooks to just track everything within your company. Like that simple stuff is base level. You need that stuff, because at the end of the year, when you actually have to do your HMRC stuff, your accountant's going to be like, hey, where are your records? And at least in that situation, you can hand the records over, and they're cool. They're good to go. I know.
And it's also the law now that you have digital tax records.
Yeah.
So everybody look into Xero and QuickBook right away.
Like right away. Like if you are starting, like, you know, if you're very early in your company right now, or you're just getting started, like you have Xero or QuickBooks. Like it's a thing that you need. On top of that, a lawyer. The other thing about a lawyer is, yeah, for negotiations, you want a lawyer, and yes, they cost money, but the money that you will save in the grand scheme of having a responsible person negotiating that contract for you is what is. I still have indie friends who negotiate their own contracts, and I die a little inside, like every time.
It's okay, I negotiate my own contract. You can do it.
And also, initially, I was a little bit like afraid of going to a lawyer, because I assumed, like, you know, you go into the office, you sit down, they start charging you money, and you get a giant bill.
Well, they do.
Well, but they only start charging you money after you agree to be charged, right? You can't just go in and first talk about it and only afterwards get charged.
So one of the big stumbling blocks is funding. I found that hard with both of my games. So I wonder if one of you could outline some of the sort of funding opportunities that we have available to us.
Where are you at now on that?
Where am I? I'm starting to look for money. So if there's anyone in the room who has a lot of money. Yeah, I mean, the UK itself has opportunities. There are government grants for innovation, various different things. Sometimes you have to kind of dig around, but there's a mailing list that often displays things that are games related, but they tend to be, yeah, innovations within government funding. But also the UK Games Fund. Mm-hmm. So that exists. It has two parts. One is for graduates to try and get them up and running, who know essentially nothing about sort of game development within a professional environment yet. And the other one is money for companies that have either just set up, so you could be experienced in the industry, but you're a new company, or there's a real reason why you need a grant. Maybe it's a new adventurous project. Yeah, but that's there, and that's free money, so you don't have to pay it back.
And it's also, they have the Transfuser program, which is part of the UK Games Fund. So if you're starting out and you know nothing about getting funding or anything like that, going for the UK Games Fund, being part of Transfuser is a really great leg up to being part of events like this and having that initial support in showcasing your work.
It's worth mentioning, though, so apart from the Transfuser program, if you're going for UK Games Fund or, for example, a Creative Europe Media program, I got a grant from Creative Europe. Both of these grants are match funding, so for every £1 that they give, you need to put in £1 as well, or you need to find somebody who gives you money to put in £1. So these programs, sadly, are not helpful to people just starting out. And there's actually, and it's not good news, in the UK there's surprisingly little in terms of funding for startups in games. So just to give you like one reference point, so what I did when I started my company 8 years ago, I knew that I always knew since I was a little girl that I wanted to make games and that I wanted to make my own games. So I saved up money to be able to do that. And wow. I actually recommend everybody who asks me, like, how can you do your studio? Like, if you know that you want to do it, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, also don't think about it as a sprint. Like, you don't have to do it today. Like, you have time. Like, there's no age limit on when you can start your studio. And just like think about like saving up some money so that at least even if you have if you manage to save up £15,000, I know that can sound like a lot, but if you can manage to save up £15,000, then you can go to the UK Games Fund or you can go to Creative Europe and they give you another 15,000. And then you already have 30,000. And maybe somebody, a publisher will see, oh, these people are really serious about what they are doing. Why don't we give them another 30,000? And then you're getting more money.
And if you're doing things part-time, like at night and stuff like that, take advantage of things that are very specific to the era that we live on. Patreon, doing stuff like that. There are folks who are doing decent.
Yeah.
They're doing decent off of their Patreon stuff right now. And that helps fuel everything. It also gets your name out there. It also gets criticism coming at you because, again, if you're not going to be well adjusted to criticism, just stay away from this industry. Like, don't get involved in it.
Yeah, there is some equity investment in games, and it's kind of hard to come by. But there's a government program called SEIS by which investors can give you up to 150,000, and it's very tax advantaged for them. So up to those amounts, you can find people who are willing to invest in your company, but it's a bit different than going to a publisher because you're not pitching a specific project. You're more pitching kind of this team and this concept for a business. So it's a bit of a different approach. You're selling the fact that this is a business that can grow and that has a lot of room to grow very quickly.
I think with any of these, there are different funding opportunities. You have VCs who tend to want to invest in the company itself. You have angel investors. You have crowdfunding.
Arts funding.
And I think the main thing is to be aware of what they want in return. Because you will find people who have run really successful companies and they're never spend a single pound of your own money, and that's worked for them. And you've got other people who've almost entirely self-funded and they've been able to take all the profits and they're like, this works for me. You just don't know. Nobody can tell you what's going to work for you, but knowing whether you're putting up company equity or profits of the game, it's being aware of what relationship you yourself feel comfortable.
And sort of the classic things right now are early access and Kickstarter. And at this point, we have enough case studies. There's enough information out there that you can read up on from major developers and people who were less successful in what the challenges were in being part of early access and being part of Kickstarter. Because no one should be going into early access or Kickstarter as just, oh, this is no thought going into it. It is a campaign. It's it's like going to investors. It's like going to publishers. Early access and Kickstarter is not just a whim. There's a full-blown campaign that goes into that, the same as you would challenge anything else.
Also, there's 2 books that you've published with Bithell Games.
Yes.
If you're starting a company, just buy them. Don't even care about
books called? Give us the title.
Thank you.
Plug the books.
It's the Game Dev Business Handbook and the Game Dev Budgeting Handbook, both available at gamedevbizbook.com and on Amazon.
Other books are available. Maybe. So let's talk about making a demo. So I suppose why have a demo? What are the advantages?
So demo or vertical slice?
Oh, well, if you want to start with a vertical slice and then we can move on to a demo.
I mean, you did a vertical slice.
I think I used those kind of interchangeably, but I think what was important for us is to have a very clear finishing line of this is actually what we're making, because it can creep up because you start making a vertical slice and you start adding things and you start actually making the game. But
could you perhaps give a definition? What's the difference between a vertical slice and a demo?
I would say that the definition is time. A vertical slice can't be much more than 10
time
minutes.
Time and money.
No, yeah. But even playthrough time, it can't be much more than 10 minutes because you want to just show this to people and have them immediately understand why this is special, why this is good, and it also gives you this finishing line where after you finish the vertical slice, you pretty much no longer develop the game. Then your job becomes taking that vertical slice and trying to raise the funds to make the rest of the game. Because 99% of projects, you're not going to be able to make the whole game without extra funding. So there's 2 separate stages of making a vertical slice and then showing it, selling it. And having those 2 very distinct stages for us was very helpful.
So you're using it to sell to investors, to get people interested in the game, and also to give you maybe a roadmap of the game and sort of crystallize what the game is.
Yeah.
And we've never done a vertical slice.
Right.
For us, it's been gray box demos. I mean, if you see our early stage stuff, like, no, you will never see our early stage stuff, like, period. For us, it's, we make these things, and then, you know, in several of the cases we've gone and done on it. Oh, jeez. We've went for it on our own, yeah, we've shown it to contacts that we have, because we have launched several titles at this point. You know, we are lucky enough to be able to get meetings and show people, hey, yes, this is not the prettiest thing in the world, but this is the concept that we're going for, and they get on board with that.
Mm-hmm. So when, okay, yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to say it doesn't always have to be a vertical slice or a demo. I think Giant Sparrow, who did What Remains of Edith Finch, they, if you search for it on the internet, I think that they published the pitch document that they sent to Annapurna, which got it signed in the end. So if you're really good at writing and, you know, explaining things through writing and have like accompanying images, that can also sometimes be enough. Okay.
Yeah, game design document is like the old schoolist way of like getting it done. And yeah, I mean, I've absolutely seen folks like pitch with 45-page game design documents. It's not a world I will ever know, but yes, it does happen.
Okay, so so when you do make a demo, if you're not doing the game design document route, and so what are the key elements that you need in a demo? And is it different if it's a demo that's pitching to investors rather than one that you're taking to expos, and how are they different, and what are they, why?
I'll take this one.
Okay.
I think when you are making a demo and going to a show like this, and you're dealing with the public, it has to be very polished. Like, it needs to almost be vertical slice-like. And you know, the core thing we're just gonna use here is vertical slices, like, that is what your game is going to look like, or at least that's what the target of what your game is going to look like, whereas the demo can be gray box, it can be incredibly rough. So when you're showing it at something like this, yeah, it has to be further along, whereas if you are showing it to publishers, especially you know, publishers that are specifically dealing with earlier stage stuff, like Sony used to have an indie group. Like they would be a lot more on board with understanding that stuff. Mm-hmm. Again, Devolver, Raw Fury, Devolver more so probably like a higher tier presentation. But that's sort of the space. You have to know who you're pitching to, and if they themselves can see what the future of that project is, and then playing within your strengths on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think
I would want to say to that, if you're thinking of pitching to the big companies, you know, if you're thinking AAA, in my experience, there's not a lot of imagination in the boardroom. So if there's something that looks a little wrong in your game, they will misunderstand it. If you're thinking, so I used to work for Microsoft and be, you know, pitched to people like Phil Spencer and all of the high ups, like everything needs to look perfect and it needs to work perfect and there can't be a little bug. Like what you're showing, even if it's very linear and you're only pushing one button, like, you know, these 2 minutes of gameplay that you're showing need to be flawless. Because if there's a question that pops up in these people's minds, the moment that there's a question, no matter what you say, the answer will not be satisfactory. So like, I don't like really, if you're thinking of pitching, if you're going down the AAA route, which is obviously a lot of money, like we are talking, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars that can be made in that route, like you need to have a top-notch game. And I think I recommend that you read the Kotaku article about the making of Anthem. And if you then watch the E3 reveal of Anthem, and then I think you will understand what kind of level of polish I'm talking about.
So if we go on to pitching to investors, I mean, I've picked your brains many a time, Jennifer. Like, what do we need to do? So yeah, so what are the key things? What do investors want to know?
A lot of the time, investors want to know who you are. So many investors actually don't necessarily invest in a game, even though that's what they're saying, but they are investing in people. Like they're investing in people that they think have a potential to be, you know, creative vision carriers, like of the future of our industry. Like that's what everybody is really looking for. So always try to present yourself in the best possible light. Don't be shy about who you are and what you have done. Like don't try to make yourself small, but also don't try to big yourself up too much, right? I mean, and that is really hard, and I recommend practicing that with friends. Investors want to see that you can actually pull off what you're promising, so that if you are coming and you're saying, oh, we want to make this game, but you don't have a programmer on your team, or you don't have anybody with a technical background, they're not going to believe you. Do you want to jump onto that?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack there. Yeah, I mean, if you are a team, that cohesion needs to exist. It needs to feel like that group is the one making the project. And yes, you might have like the blondie in the group. Cool old school reference. You might have the blondie in the group who, yes, draws focus and everything like that. But there needs to be an understanding that, like, if you take that one person and you put them with 3 other people, it's not the same magic is not going to happen. It's not going to be the same thing. And you know, you can probably find enough case studies in this industry where someone is like, you know, has a really good reputation and a really good name, and then they move to another place, and then that thing that they did, not so great, even though it had way more resources and a bigger budget and a lot more, it still didn't work because teams matter and groups matter, and investors do absolutely pay attention to the team. Yeah, they might be looking at the stars in that team who they can throw up on a stage or put in front of a YouTube video now or whatever else, but it is the team.
Also, one thing, if you're speaking to investors, like if they give you money, they want to know how they're going to make this money back. And like I struggle a lot with this as well, as explaining, you know, why is this game that I'm making going to sell? And it's almost impossible to prove that, right? Like you would have to be able to see the future. But it really pays off, like spending a lot of time in doing market research. I don't know how functional Steam Spy is at the moment. You know, looking at all of the sales numbers that you can get, find products that might be in some way similar to your game and that were successes. And then it's kind of like, again, like you're building a vision for your investor, right? You're building a dream. If you're giving me this much money, then you'll make that much more money.
Mm-hmm. And that's why Jody's great, like, you know, the narrative track, like that works, flavor works, and doing, you know, the hybrid game FMV video thing works. And that's something investors can understand. The problem we have, again, with jumping around genres, I'm not even going to go to an investor and try to get a long-term thing, because I can't guarantee for them that 3 years from now that like we're going to be doing a sequel to this game, or we are going to do this same similar game. Because when you do the same project after the same project after the same project, the numbers and the information that you have shows a track. You know, and maybe there's a plateau or whatever, but at least you have that data. When we were doing Subsurface, Mike is talking to me about, you know, how is this game going to do? And I shrugged my shoulders, like, because we didn't have, I could look at some narrative games in the market, but there was nothing I could truly compare to. Whereas, like, you know, if the blessed day happens one day where he turns around and says, I want to make Thomas Was Alone too. Cool. Like, I can sit down, I can work out that budget, I can figure out like where the interest will be, who's going to be interested in it, what kind of like response there will be to it. Like that, it's a very different thing. So yeah, if you're a game developer who likes a specific style of game, it may be easier to find investors who like that specific style of game and bring them on board.
Mm-hmm. Have you started anything to add, Jody, like being at the very beginning of this?
No, I think the big thing is having a vision that you can share with investors, rather than just going, I've got a great game idea, having a vision that they can buy into. And sometimes that is difficult to sort of put into words what that is, because a lot of it is relying on someone being able to see how, like, if you've got concept art, or you've got something that's unfinished, but you're like, this is what it what it will look like, or this is what it will be. You're having to trust people to be able to put like, oh, I see this rough thing, and I see and I hear what you're saying about what the end product is. And some investors, even publishers, they can't put two and two together. But if you can sell them on a vision that, like something that they know what they're buying into and that they can get excited about, getting them excited, that's more likely to get you money than going, I've got a great game idea.
Yeah, I think in our case it was a bit easier because we had like a pretty kind of simple story we were trying to tell that, you know, people like films, people like games. We thought if we combined them really well, we could bring a lot of people that maybe don't even play games to play games. And then the final step that was, you know, the hard one was to prove to investors or whoever we were talking that we could actually do that. And essentially the only way we found of doing that was by building a vertical slice and being like, hey, we've done like a little bit of it. We could definitely like do more. And once we combined those two, that's when things started like getting easier because we could say like, okay, people should make this thing and we can make it. And then that builds into like a cohesive narrative that we can communicate to someone.
Adding on to what Jody was saying, and like I didn't know this for the longest part, but I think everybody knows, okay, what is an elevator pitch for a game? But I think it's also important these days to have an elevator pitch for your company. What makes your company special? And I think if you can figure out these two things, elevator pitch for your game and elevator pitch for your company, then you're on a good track.
I mean, I definitely had people interested in investing in my studio based on, like, what I'm making now is completely different from what I've been doing for 6 years making war games. But because I said, like, this is what my studio wants to do, that got them excited because it's like, oh, that sounds different from we don't know any other studios that are doing that. So yeah, having that kind of couple of sentences of like, this is who we are.
And if you're stepping up for the first time, like going out there and trying to get investment or, you know, Kickstarter or everything like that, and you've been doing itch.io or itch.io, depending on whatever your pronunciation of it is, bless you. Like, that is your portfolio. Like, do not shy away from that. Like, that is absolutely something that shows that you have a work ethic. You know how to get something done and ship it. Because shipping is a talent.
Yeah, finish those things. So, making your second game.
We all looked at Alex.
Sorry, Jody. So how is it different from? I have a few questions on this.
Let's do it.
So, how is it different from the first time?
I think with the first game when we made Tengami, there was like a lot of excitement around that we are a new studio, you know, you're like the new kid on the block, and you get a lot of attention for that. And when the first game is out, people will obviously judge you on that first game and also partially on that success. But actually, I have to say, I found it easier to make the second game because with the first game, like there's so many things that I didn't know. Like I had never published a game to the App Store before. I published a game, you know, we put it on Steam, we put it on Google Play, we put it on the Wii U. Like we worked with Nintendo, like we worked with so many people. I had to call up in the United States the IRS so that we get like a tax number for the company. You know, like there's like all these like million of admin things that you need to do just to be set up as a company to sell your game internationally. And with the second game, you know, the company's established. That's like all set up. I have my relationships, and I think that's also another part. Like I have so many more relationships because we did the first game than, you know, before we started it. So I feel like it's in a way easier to do a second game, and you also have a little bit, you know, even if you just have a tiny audience of people that really loved your game, they're going to be excited about your second. So that's already like a better. I feel like it's a better starting off point than the first game.
Like, I mean, like I said, the thing about working with a creative partner who switches genres every single game is very challenging. It is. I mean, that's the like. I don't even have the words to express. Like,
so is every game a first game?
Every game is a first game. Like, because you don't have. because it goes back to the thing I was saying about the teams and you know, finding the teams and working with those teams is, okay, that team has never made, like, even if you bring back the same people, that team hasn't necessarily, and I think in our case this is true, hasn't worked in that genre either. So it is. It's the first one every single time. The only one that we've ever gotten close to, you know, being a sequel is Subsurface Circular, and then we did Quarantine Circular. And in Quarantine Circular, yeah, we sort of experimented again, and you know, did a lot more endings to it, added a lot more characters. We learned a lot of stuff from that, but still, like, too much of it was our first time doing it. That, you know, bring me back in like 4 years, and maybe by that point I'll have worked on a sequel.
Figured it out.
But I mean, I would say, like, unless you just want to make one game and that's it, most people set out to, you go independent because you want to make games, and you want to make the first game as good as it can be, but you also want to be in a position to make that second game. You need to be thinking about what finances do I need to see me into that period of, like, I've shipped a game, you're not going to get paid day 0, and then, woo, we can just go and, like, spend that and, like, start the next game. If you've got an idea that you can, for a game that you can finish in 3 months, because development will always overrun, and shipping that first game is, you'll learn so much by just going through the whole process that, yeah, you go, oh, I've got a 2-year game. It's probably going to be longer than a 2-year game. If you go, I've got a project that I can finish in 6 months, I can ship it, we'll have enough money in the bank to go on to the second game, you'll be in a much better position to have learned from everything from that first game. And it might not be a massive hit, but maybe the second game will, maybe the third game will, maybe overall, you're much more likely statistically to survive. Yeah.
I just want to ask, before we sort of open to questions, about growing your studio. So yeah, I read the BioWare article last night, and it got me thinking about, you know, does every studio have to grow? Is one thing. There seems to be, you know, this pressure to grow, that means success. And so does every studio have to grow, and how do you know whether, you know, what you should do and what works for you? And also, how does your process of your change from when you're like a 2-person team, and then you're 10, and then you're 50? You know, if your process doesn't change, then is that where the sort of, you know, that sort of development cycles just spiral out of control?
So it depends on shareholders. Shareholders, like, and by shareholders, I mean it could be you and the friend that started the company, or you and the other 2 people who, like, you know, just got together and made the thing. This is a constant conversation that should be happening. Once you bring in, you know, venture capitalists or something along those lines, then yes, you have to grow, because there's something called an exit, which will happen in approximately 5 years. That is the expectation. So in those cases, yes, you must grow. In our case, no, we are making very conscious decisions to, like, hold the line. We've talked numerous times about opening up an office. We've sort of decided against that at this point. We are going to focus on decentralized production, and, you know, compensating freelancers very well, but there is no core office. That may change for example, the creative group will stay decentralized and everything like that, but maybe the company grows to the point where, no, you know, I do need an in-house bookkeeper. I do need, you know, like that, like a core group, which is something like 2K in New York has, right? Like, that is the business group, like, controlling stuff. So every company, from my stance, you've got 4 people up here. You have all of you out there. Probably, you know, none of us have the exact same structure. And it's worth talking to your friends, talking to your colleagues, talking through all of that to see what works best for you. But no, there is no one answer.
Yeah.
I think if you're growing a studio, at some point you're going to have to trust people to manage other people. You can't micromanage, otherwise that becomes your entire job. And for most of us, we've started making games independently because we want to make something. And I think even if you are just 3 people, or if you're 30 people or 300, having a studio mandate of like these are our kind of core goals, whether it's I want to make we want to make really awesome games, or we want to be the best narrative game developers, or we want to be a studio that does 0 overtime. Being able to refer back to those, whether you're 30 or 3 people, because as 3 people, you can, if anything goes wrong, you can organically have that conversation of, I'm not quite happy with the direction this game is going or where we're going as a studio, but you can sit down. But if you've got that clearly laid out, that you've all agreed, well, we'll all manage things and we'll all develop in a different way, but our goal is that we want to make an awesome game, or we want to sell 30,000 copies. That's what you can kind of go back to and go, does what I want to do feed into this statement?
Yeah, I actively don't want to grow my company. I always want to stay small. The way that I think about making independent games is more similar to like a movie model, I guess, where you have like what they call a production company, and the production company is the core. And then you find contractors that you pay well and who are specialized in what you need, and they help you to make the game. And yeah.
Our company has grown a bit. You know, we're not huge, but I found that personally, like the way I work has had to change a bit, where I've had to like make more of a conscious effort to communicate, because when it was just the 2 of us, it's pretty easy. It's a conversation. But when it's, you know, grows 6, 7, 8 people, the opportunity for miscommunication, it just kind of grows exponentially. So I've had to like personally make an effort to make sure that like all the things that like maybe I think could have left unsaid, that I make sure like I say everything and that we're all communicating. So it does like change things. I don't know if it's like less fun or more fun, but it is slightly like different. So that's something that, yeah, you have to consider when you're deciding whether to grow or not.
Yeah, I think going back to the BioWare, do we need to stop? Okay.
Yeah, I think we need to. Do you want to do questions, or is? Okay, yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Hopefully this will be useful for a lot of people here. The dream is to work for like a small kind of 10 or 20 less than studio like you guys have. How does, especially ones like highly skilled, highly intelligent, how does a highly skilled freelancer get in touch with small studios when they are looking to bring on a new freelancer? Is it all networking, or are there certain strategies that a freelancer might use?
I think just get in contact. Like most of the time, because I don't have job openings at the minute, like I know what I'll need in the future, but I'm not like actively trying to hire anyone. But kind of just keeping people up to date, like not harassing anyone, but sort of just going, this is me, these are my skills, and if you know, like if 6 months goes by, just sending an update of not like, hey, I just want it, like, I haven't heard from you, like don't send like every 2 weeks, but just kind of be...
Yeah, just I'm available.
Yeah, be there. And also keep an eye on what they're doing, because when I announced the studio, I was like, we're making narrative games. I had a load of people going like, this sounds awesome what you're doing, and I'm like, I haven't really said much, but slowly I'll release information about the game, and people will pick up on that, and like I've actually got my composer here, and he's really excited about the game I'm working on. And as we both spoke more about it, we both kind of realized, oh, this is something that we both want to work on together. If a studio releases more information and you're like, yes, this is exciting to me,
just tell them.
Yeah, me as a director is like, I want excited people working on my project, because like you could be the best person at what you do in the world, but if you're like, yeah, it's a job and I'm really good.
We've only got time for 2 questions, Jodie. This panel is amazing. They've been emailing me all week. Like
Oh yeah. I know the first question was about project versus team, but at what point do you actually start looking at the market itself and seeing whether this project or whatever you're planning on will actually sell? Do you look at the product? Do you have a product idea first, or do you have a set of product ideas, or do you look at the market first and then find a niche? What do each of you do?
So I'll just quickly say I never look at the market. I call my company Beautifully Crafted but Unconventional Games, and that's my niche. So I want people to come to me to see my niche.
I decided on what I wanted to make, and then I kind of sound checked that there was an audience for it, because I want to make games that I enjoy, but I want there to be an audience that's going to buy it. Otherwise, it's just me going, I made a beautiful piece of art or something. So yeah, I still check.
I could put you in a museum.
I just made art.
I just made art.
No, but it's like an art installation of me. That, like, I want people to buy my game because I need to feed myself and I need to pay other people. So
let me just say something really useful. There's a man called Ryan Clark. Brace Yourself Games, and he has a really great YouTube talk about the way that he does market research. So he did Crypt of the Necromancer as a reference point. You've probably heard of that game. And he gives a really great talk about how he does market research and when he does that and how that influences the games that he makes.
Yeah, and I would say that the marketing for the game starts when you make that vertical slice. Like, if that vertical slice can immediately entice someone that they might want to buy the rest of the game, that's usually a good sign that you're making something that is inherently marketable.
And to get your name out there, again, you have to ship. So yes, we have absolutely had the opportunity to do a battle royale game and get 30 million, 40 million to do it. But going to that market, what? You're we are very much it's independent development. We can't compete against Activision, EA, everything else. When they go this way, we have to go that way. Or, even anything within their sphere of influence, that's problematic. So.
Yeah, I agree with Pavel as well. The response of people. Because the only reason we carried on with our game, which we started at a game jam, was it won the Audience Choice Award at the jam, and so we were people were really excited by it, which we just thought it was this throwaway thing at a jam. And then we were in left field last year, and the responses have really driven us. It's really great to get it out there and to get that feedback.
I think remember that there's a lot of flexibility, and there's certain things that you can do as a small independent studio that big studios can't. It's really difficult to steer a big ship when you've got to pay hundreds of people's salary, that you kind of have to think, what can I do really well, rather than I just want to make my version of that game, right? What do you do well, and make a game that utilizes that.
I think that's it. I think our time is up. Yeah.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.